Hello, hi, and welcome to another episode of The Emma Gunn Show. I'm so pleased to be spending this time with you. Whether you are listening to me on a podcast or whether you are watching me on YouTube, welcome. It really is a delight to spend this time with you. So let's crack on and talk about something that's been on my mind, so much so that I wrote about it on my Substack yesterday. And that is the fact that ever since I did last year's No Social Media in December, I had thought, and I think I had probably said to you, I had loved the whole process, the whole experiment so much that I thought I will do that every December. And yet yesterday, December the 1st, 2024, I logged into my Instagram, and it wasn't until I got to lunchtime that I realized that, oh, it's December, I'm not supposed to be doing this. So I ended up, and this is what happens with Substack, or it does for me. I am somebody who, and I'm really learning this a lot recently, but I actually want to talk about that a little bit later on in the episode. But if I try to be too rigid with, you should do this then I don't tend to bring my best to the table if it's enforced. And there was a brilliant meme on social media the other day, something like, I'm a Sagittarius, so you need to know that I will do it and I will get it done, but not if you tell me to do it and get it done. And I think maybe even just sort of putting things into a diary or having an alert kind of, I don't know, just takes the edge off whatever I can bring to it anyway. So yesterday evening, I had a long drive in the day. The weather was absolutely grim. And I was so lucky because there was a break in the rain, and I thought, right, I'm going for it. And I went for a walk, and I just managed to escape the rain. I got about 45 minutes in, which was great. And then I thought, you know what? Just relax. It's a Sunday. Just relax. Watch the new Lindsay Lohan film on Netflix and just chill out. Because what can happen is that I can often be thinking about the podcast or thinking about, I haven't shared that thing on stories that I said I would do, or I didn't prep for that. And so I can often be sort of half working in the background, even if I'm out and about socializing or with loved ones. And I hate that, because I want to be completely present. But it also shows up with something like trying to watch the new Lindsay Lohan film on Netflix, which is, I'll sit there and I'll finally, like 20 minutes in, I'll think, okay, I can get on board with this. And then 10 minutes later, a seed or something will start to germinate in my mind. And before I know it, the film is on pause and I'm at my computer writing something for Substack. So that's what happened yesterday. And it was about the fact that, you know what, I said I was going to take December off social media every year when I did it last year. And I completely forgot about it. And weirdly so, because all throughout this year, when I have thought about December, I have been thinking about positively and looking forward to taking a break from it. And yet I did nothing to prepare for it. Last year, I re-edited some old podcasts so that there wouldn't be a break in the feed, so that anyone who enjoys tuning into me every week could still find an episode with a new introduction. I thought, well, that's fair. I'm taking some time off, but I still want to give you something. And I think I pre-recorded some bullet points, and I didn't pre-record anything for social media, but I had prepped. And what I realized is that I hadn't done anything to prepare not only me, but you or my followers or my readers or my listeners to anticipate the fact that for the month I'd be off, which I think if you didn't know, you might think, what's going on here? It's a bit weird. So I thought, well, I've kind of screwed it up, haven't I, by not preparing? And if you fail to prepare, you prepare to fail. That's a goodie. But the other thing is, and thank you to everybody who's messaged me about this, because I've had such lovely messages about this recently, is that I had almost, after that experiment of taking time away from social media and realizing its lack of importance to many things, had sort of stopped creating as much content, and I hadn't put as much thought into it. And then earlier on this year, I just decided to start creating loads of beauty videos. I thought I'll just talk about a product and I'll pop it on a video, and I'll do that every day for a month and see what happens. And because I wasn't producing much content, all the advice I was getting from people who were saying, you need to grow your following, you should post every day. So I was following all the instructions. And I mean, honestly, nothing seems to illicit growth. My numbers haven't gone up, but my engagement has. So I suppose that's a good thing. And then the makeup videos turned into a few fashion posts, and then the fashion post turned into, I'm going to try my hand at cooking online. Anyway, so I've sort of got into this stride, if you like, of it might sound like a daft observation or a daft word to use, but almost being a little bit fearless about what I put out there. And that might sound completely nonsense, but if it's not your sort of your speciality, beauty is my background, beauty and health is my background, interviewing is my background, to suddenly move into these different spaces does feel a little bit like, oh, should I be doing that? Am I stepping on anyone's toes? Is this weird? Anyway, I've really enjoyed it, and the feedback I've been getting from people on Instagram especially has been how much they're enjoying it too. So that's great. So again, it felt quite silly to take a break from social media at a time when actually it's making me feel good. It's not like last year where I felt like personally my social battery was completely drained and I just wanted to hibernate. But in addition, I also wasn't feeling particularly inspired creatively. And so when I did come to write something or film something or edit something, I was coming sort of with a bad attitude, like I was doing my homework in detention, as opposed to feeling really inspired and really motivated. So that's why I don't want to stop this year, because I don't feel any of those things. I feel quite excited. I feel quite I sort of look forward to putting on the camera and seeing what will happen. And if I have an idea, I think, you know what, I'll see that through. And I've done some what I eat in a day videos. I've done some cooking videos, and I've loved doing them, but the feedback's also been really interesting. Now, the flip side to all of that is that when you do put out things that I would say show a little bit more of yourself, or you're expressing more of an opinion, that what can also come hand in hand with that, as we've discussed on previous episodes, is more negative feedback. And all feedback is worth reading, but not all feedback. You kind of have to understand where some of it is coming from. And I think a couple of weeks ago, it had started to become the thing that would take up too much time after posting something. And I remember a friend said to me, well, if you're going to post this stuff, you are going to have to expect it. And so I don't want to be one of those people who blocks and deletes, but I actually think that sometimes a little block and a little delete, if someone isn't coming to you with in good sort of, I don't know, not in good conscience, in good spirit, just there's poor intention, I think you can feel it, and I think they're best to get rid of. And I think that's the best way to make something kind of not linger. And taking it away from social media, I remember a friend of mine saying to me years ago about emails, that if you get a critical email in work or whatever it might be, or if someone sends you a message that you just don't like, you can read it, but then you must delete it. And I said, oh, that's really interesting. Do you not then go back and look? And her point was, the first time you read it, it's gonna hit the hardest. You don't need to read it again. You've got the gist. But when you keep something like that in your mailbox, you're keeping it there, and even keeping it there can hurt you. But then when you do eventually, because you will go back and revisit, it will hurt you again. So read it once, take from it what you think you can take from it to get better, and then move on. And I think that's a really good, I've tried to operate using that kind of technique for a while, because reasoning with people who want to fight with you or just want you to acquiesce and say, you know what, you're right and I'm wrong, which I'm not going to do, is sort of pointless. So it's kind of judging all of those things. But that sort of brings me on to something else that I was thinking about, because I went to a couple of Christmas events last week, and they were so lovely. They were so brilliant. They were so well done. They were just fantastic. And yet I know I didn't have a great time, not because of the event, but because talking about social batteries, I was thinking I was too overstimulated by all the noise, the people, all of how fantastic it was, that I said I didn't have a good time. That's a little bit of a lie. I had a great time, but then I came away from it feeling that I wasn't a great version of myself. And that's a form of anxiety, or that's a form of, I don't know whether it's over self-awareness or self-criticism, that I think can feel quite crippling. And I sort of caught it last week, and I thought, oh, that's really interesting, because I was saying, maybe I just shouldn't participate in those events anymore, because I just feel like I sort of am a bit starey, or I say really random things during small talk. I'm much better as a one-to-one conversationalist than I am as someone who exchanges small talk in parties, especially if they're loud. I mean, I'm showing my age here. But it made me sort of have a bigger conversation with myself and with a few friends about anxiety and about the sort of how where does it come from? And I was saying that there's that shift, isn't there? There's that thing of where you go to something, you have a good time, and then after the fact, you might go home and think, oh, was I actually an idiot? Did everybody actually hate me? Did I actually say something really offensive? And you sort of relive the experience through a lens of something so critical that you're sort of almost like finding where you went wrong. But that sort of happens after the event. And I was thinking about periods in my life when I felt anxious, like when I have struggled with anxiety. And it's almost as though that thing is happening in the moment at the time when you're having the experience. So that's why the anxiety, that's why I think a panic attack can feel the way it does, because it's two very real, strong realities. It's your actual reality, your physical reality, and your mental reality sort of all collapsing in on each other. All whilst trying to, I don't know, hold a conversation with someone who you don't know very well and possibly can't remember their name. And then I was having these longer conversations with my friends about self-awareness and how I mentioned this on the So Bad It's Good podcast with Ryan Bailey a few weeks ago, because we were talking about reality stars. And it's a reality TV breakdown podcast. It's brilliant. You should really go and follow Ryan. He's fantastic. But there are certain characters within reality TV. They're not characters, obviously, because they're real human beings. But they seem to have absolutely no self-awareness. But they also seem to have absolutely no regret about the way that they treat people or the way that they interact in social situations. And I was saying to Ryan, in a way, I kind of envy that, because it is the polar opposite from me. I would never say some of the things that I see characters, like if you watch Vanderpump Rules, I'm thinking about Jax, or Real Housewives of New York, I'm thinking of Ramona. I would never be able to operate the way that they do socially, because I would be so crippled by how I had behaved in the aftermath of like poring over it from my mental memory bank, that sometimes I think, I wonder what it must be like to be in the mind of somebody who doesn't experience anxiety, or who doesn't no, anxiety is the wrong thing, who doesn't experience questioning themselves. And again, this was leading on to so many different sort of trains of thought. But I was thinking about the fact that, again, this is something I'm quite jealous of in other people. Those people who think they're great, think they're fine, think no work needs to be done here. I feel quite envious of those people, because I think there's a part of me that thinks of myself as kind of a soggy bit of clay that needs to be molded, or that even if I've made strides in something, I could still do better. And part of that's obviously good. There are good elements to thinking that there's always room for improvement, but that it can also be quite tiresome, and it can also, or tiring, and it can also be quite exhausting, and it can also make you feel as though you're never good enough. You can always sort of rest on that thing of, I could be better, or I could do more, which implies, or the implication of that is that where you are now is somehow falling below standard. And I really, really am jealous of those people who'll think, yeah, I went for 2 runs this year, nailed it. Because if I don't do 3 workouts a week, I think, damn it, I didn't organize my time well enough. And I sort of like take a chunk out of myself for not, and it doesn't have to be about exercise, but it just has to be about anything. Or like, I didn't send enough emails, or I didn't reach out to those people this week, or I said I'd contact so-and-so and I didn't get around to it. It's all of those things that instead of just going, oh, I'll do it next week, full stop, get on with my life. It's like, oh man. And then you can kind of go down that mental path of, I wonder if they've noticed that I didn't get back to them this week. I wonder whether they're thinking that I have, all of those sorts of things. So I sort of, thinking about how you show up in the world is so interesting, but also how you interpret that world, you compute it, and how you treat yourself with that information after the fact. Please let me know. I think that you're all really smart and really clever. So let me know whether any of what I've just said chimes with you, because I do think there is something to be said for sort of almost being over self-aware. And I wonder whether sometimes over self-awareness is what leads us into things like anxiety or anxious episodes where everything feels a little bit overwhelming, because the world can feel quite tough. But what we forget is that we're the one being toughest on ourselves. If any of that chimes, please do email me, office@emmaguns.com, comment on my Substack, DM me on Instagram. If you're watching on YouTube, please comment below. Okay, so let's talk about when good things can look like bad things. And let me explain. I have been feeling quite tired this year. And I mean, like a lot of women in their late 40s, I could go perimenopause, but it was triggering. It was sort of trigger. I hate that word in many ways, but let's just go with it. It was causing me some concern, some alarm, if you like. Not from a health perspective, but because previously when I've been really tired or I've had a sort of listlessness to me, it has gone hand in hand with depression and anxiety. So for context, about 9 years ago, I was diagnosed with severe anxiety and depression. And it was a very challenging time, actually, that I think anyone who's been there is very scared about going back to it. And so sometimes when I feel a certain way, even though nothing has compared to how bad things were, there are sometimes little flashes of things that I think, oof, are we spiraling? Are we spiraling? Using the third person, goodness me. Anyway, so this year I've been feeling a bit tired, and I think I said to you that I changed my alarm clock, and that has made a huge difference. But I have also sort of made a few other changes, and they've been complicated because when I was going through depression and anxiety, these behaviors would have looked like bad ones. So one of them, for example, is, I think I said this on the last podcast, when I wake up in the morning now that I've changed my alarm, I definitely am feeling quite, the weather in the UK hasn't been great. There have been some beautiful sunny days, but it's been very grey. There have been days when it has felt like, I remember going to Iceland once, and it was at a time of the year when it never really got sunlight. It was very sort of twilighty all day, and it really can take its toll. And that's what it's felt like a bit here. And so there have been some times where I have thought, I've woken up in the morning, I've meditated, and then I've thought, yeah, you feel very sluggish this morning. And I think for so many years I sort of alluding to what I talked about in the first part of the show, you kind of push, I could do better, so I'll get up earlier. That would have been my previous strategy. Getting up at 6 isn't working, maybe I'll get up at 5, as opposed to maybe I'll get up at 7. But I wake up now and I check in with myself, and it's like, how am I feeling? And if I'm feeling a bit slow, or if I'm feeling a bit sluggish, I think, okay, well then we'll have a very slow process of getting up in the morning. And I've been doing this for a few weeks now. And the reason I wanted to bring it up, because I think it is really confusing, when actually the thing that you need to do in order to feel better, because I do feel so much better. I usually love to work out between 7 and 8, but now I'm working out between 9 and 10. I'll do some emails first. And it's such a topsy-turvy approach to my morning, but actually I've been more productive. I feel better. I'm not sleeping brilliantly, but I do believe that's hormonal. But I'm not getting that terrible mid-afternoon slump anymore. I'm feeling much less sort of rattled. And truthfully, I'm not getting to 3 o'clock in the afternoon and struggling to keep my eyes open, which makes me think, well, all of these things, even though having a lie-in, which is what getting up at 7 feels like, even though having a lie-in used to be a choice of, I just don't want to face a day, actually it's that whole reframe of, I do want to face the day, I just want to face the day as a better version of myself, or I want to face the day feeling energized. So it's that same behavior, but reframing it to mean something completely different. And I think the power of the reframe is just endless, absolutely endless. And I heard something brilliant the other day. A friend of mine was talking about the fact that they feel that they're very much at a crossroads at the moment. They feel stuck. And then a mutual friend, we were all in a WhatsApp group talking about it, and somebody sent this meme, and I forget, or not a meme, sorry, it was a video, and I forget where it was from, and I forget who it was, because I was sort of watching it on the fly. But it was really brilliant, because it said, okay, so if you think that you're at a crossroads, if you think that you're stuck, what does that mean? Like, think about what it physically means to be at a crossroads. You've got a road in front of you, a road behind you, and 2 roads to the side. That's a crossroads. So if you think about that, really, what it means is that you've got 4 options. You just don't know which one to choose. And it was a bit like, whoa, okay, right, that's so much more interesting. But it's a complete reframe, isn't it? It's like, I'm not stuck, I have choices. And one feels like the handbrake going on quite abruptly. And another one feels like, well, the world's your oyster. But they're exactly the same predicament. And so I have been finding, definitely towards the end of this year, and I've spoken to a lot of friends recently, and it does seem to be that everyone sort of I don't know whether it's an age thing. I think it probably is an age thing, because I don't remember saying this sort of thing when I was in my 20s or 30s. But lots of people that I'm chatting to are just sort of saying, oh, I just can't wait for Christmas. I just can't wait to take a break. I just can't wait for this, that, and ever. I just can't wait to slow down or whatever. And so I think that there's a general sort of malaise that might be present. And I think a lot of it, from speaking to friends and even with my own experience, is that we have set ourselves such high standards that it's not that we're burning out, but we just are relentlessly pushing towards something at all times, thinking that we've got to get over a certain type of hump or get towards a certain type of goal. And what I'm about to say, if you'd said it to me a few years ago, would have given me an out to be lazy. And it doesn't mean that now. And it's not about be kind to yourself, like show yourself some love. It's not that. It's just, well, what do I have to do? Well, let's get that done. And then let's explore everything else. And a few of my friends and I have sort of been tinkering with it and trying it. And pretty much 100% of the feedback is, if I get up in the morning and I sit in bed and I think I've got to do that, I said I'd do that, I've got to go and pick that thing up, and you sort of turn it into this very convoluted, red hot, tangled mess in your head that feels, when you look at it, like there's no way that you could possibly get it done. But so, for example, I'll give you my example this morning. Again, side note, I feel as though all I'm doing at the moment is vacuuming. Has anyone else got that? All I'm doing at the moment is vacuuming. Yes, I'm quite fastidious about my carpets looking neat and not having footprints on them, but there just seems to be dust everywhere. So I feel like twice a day I'm vacuuming. Side note. Anyway, so this morning I thought, oh yeah, well I've got to do that in the office. I don't like the office, so I've got to do the hoovering first, and I've got to do the And before I knew it, I had turned doing this, sitting in front of the camera and recording this podcast, filming this podcast, I had turned it into something that was so far away from me, that was on the other side of tasks that I didn't want to do. I've got to do that. I've got to do my workout. I've got to do the kitchen. I've got to pick up that shirt. I've got to drop that thing off before such and such time. And then I'll do that. And I turned it into something unnecessarily stressful. And I thought, okay, what about this? What about I do my workout, wash my hair? And again, all of those things in that tangle just become, yeah, it's going to take me ages to wash my hair. And I thought, what if we just wash your hair? I don't know. It just seems to be that we're so fixed on trying to achieve so much that we give ourselves absolutely no grace, and we make things bigger than they are in our head. And I don't know whether that's a sign of something else, but having spoken to friends, it seems like quite a few people are experiencing that at the moment. And I have just found that lowering the bar for myself, setting lower expectations, which obviously red alert, danger zone, that could be bad. But weirdly, with this reframe, with this idea of, okay, let's just do things piece by piece. And we talked about productivity on an episode a little while ago. Actually, I've been way more productive in far less time as a result. And that's been such a useful and fantastic reframe, especially recognizing that a lot of the things that I'm doing were things that, had I done them previously, they would have been detrimental. They would have worked against me. So it's interesting that getting up a bit later, exercising less a week, because I don't want to constantly be like, have that in the morning to do. Actually, it's working for me as opposed to against me. So reframing might be the thing. If you're sitting here and you're sitting there and you're listening, or you're walking and you're thinking, this has been causing me stress, or this has been, think of the reframe. And if you're not sure what the reframe could be, DM me or comment under this video or email me at office@emmaguns.com and we can work it out together, or go over to Substack. I'll put a post up when this goes live. Go over to Substack and let other listeners help you with the reframe, because you're all brilliant and you're all very good at helping each other. So if you're stuck on something and think a reframe would help, let's help each other. Let's go to all of those things. All of those links and info will be in the show notes, and we can give each other a hand over there. Right, let's land this plane. In this part of the podcast / episode, I wanted to talk about Vinted again, because I have talked about Vinted at length this year. It is it has been such a fun experience, and I have gone from selling to buying to now being pretty inactive on the platform. I occasionally upload things when I think, in fact, I've got some knee-high boots that I've got to take a picture of and upload, along with a few other things later. I might put a link on my stories. But I kind of have, as is the case with many of things, I've kind of peaked and troughed, and now I feel like I've kind of got my rhythm with it. And the only reason I mention it is because we're coming up to Christmas, and a lot of people are saying, what do you want for Christmas? Or we've just had Black Friday, and there's been all of these. I mean, I've done it. I've shared things on my social media that I thought people might like. To be fair, anything that I've shared that was in a Black Friday sale is something I have shared previously when it was at full price, or is a brand I have talked about, or is a product I have talked about for probably a year plus. So I don't feel like one of those very negative cogs in the consumerist machine. But anyway, I have found a few bits and bobs on Vinted this year that have been wonderful, genuinely wonderful. Like if you're watching on YouTube, this is an equipment shirt that I think I got for about £8. I love it. It's great. It's perfect for something like this. I'll wear it under a jumper. You get the idea. But equipment shirts are quite expensive. I got this for barely anything. So I quite like that. For me, I like the gamification of getting something for a lot less and it's still in great condition. And people are asking, like, what do you want for Christmas? What do you want for this? What do you want for the other? And I, like, for example, I feel really sorry for all of my friends who are parents who've got teenage daughters, because it's mostly daughters, who are obsessed with that Sol de Janeiro cream. In fact, I've got a pot of it over on my desk. I used it about 2 years ago, I think. I think it was the one when I traveled to go to, last year, when I went to the Taylor Swift concert. Can you believe that was March 2023 and she's still doing that tour, has just finished that tour? No, it finishes next week, this week, I can't remember. Something about maybe it's when she's going to announce Reputation. I don't know, who knows? But I took it with me and I thought, this is quite nice. But personally, I don't like scooping body lotions out of a tub because I have quite long nails. And I'm not particularly fond of those sorts of scents. But I hadn't really been up on the Sol de Janeiro thing, and I hadn't really tapped into the fact that people get so excited about it. And then I was in Peter Jones in London a few weeks ago, and there was a big Sol de Janeiro display, and I thought, okay, well, I didn't realize it was this kind of much of a thing. Like, those gondolas in store are quite expensive, but it was a pretty impressive, quite huge one, and there was a lot of activity around it. And I thought, okay, I'm going to go and see what all this fuss is about. I know that people my age aren't getting excited about Sol de Janeiro. I know that it seems to be something that is targeted more, or seems to have been embraced by a much younger audience, that sort of tween audience, that there's been a huge backlash about this year because certain brands were targeting the tween audience with skincare that was extortionately expensive for somebody who should at this point only be earning pocket money for washing the car and doing the laundry. But I went over and I thought, maybe these are something, maybe I've been missing out. Maybe I've just been ignoring it because I don't particularly like the packaging. I use that one body lotion, but it's not really my sort of brand. Anyway, I went over and I smelled the body sprays, which are apparently the thing that all of the girls are asking for. And I gagged. I was absolutely appalled that that people go around smelling like that, because to me it's and it made me feel really sad. Okay, I don't personally like those scents, fine. I'm sure that Sol de Janeiro aren't going to cry any tears over that at all. Sorry, I just squeaked against my chair, just squeaked against something. I'm sure Sol de Janeiro aren't going to think, oh man, our business is going to fail now because Emma doesn't like us. We know that that's not what is going to happen. But my overriding feeling was, when I was a kid and I used to get pocket money, so I think I got my first job when I was 16, 17. But before then I would get pocket money. And of course I loved to go into Superdrug or Boots and I would go and buy 99p lipsticks or whatever. And we all, my generation, my friends at school, we all experimented with perfumes via the delivery system of a 99p tiny aerosol can of body spray. And we all smelled ghastly. We smelled overly floral. We smelled overly sweet. We smelled overly just disgusting. But it was nicer than not smelling of anything at all, or smelling of Shaw, or smelling of deodorant, or worst of all, smelling of BO. Actually, worst of all was smelling of that disgusting stuff and BO, because obviously a body spray is not a deodorant. I think I even made that mistake back in the day. To sting your armpits, rather. Anywho, it just made me a little bit sad for this generation that as much as there's so many incredible products out there, we all kind of got, when I was younger, we got to make those beauty mistakes, if you like. I don't think any of us would do anything other than, when I say any of us from my year at school would do anything other than spritz one of those old cans of aerosol in front, give it a sniff, and it would be very reminiscent of a particular time in our lives. But we wouldn't think about putting it on our clothes or our body. But it didn't cost us much. And those things lasted for ages, depending on how liberal you were with them. But these products are so much more expensive, so much more expensive. And I just feel sad, not just for the kids that they haven't sort of got the agency to go and buy these things for themselves and do the thing in the shop where you kind of, do I like this one? Do I want the coconutty one? Do I want the Oriental Jasmine? I think I had one was called something like that. Do I want one of those? It's sort of this more expensive thing, and they have to perhaps rely on somebody to get it for them. And it just makes me feel sad that that younger people are being targeted with these things, and that they'll look back and think, I spent how much on stuff that made me smell awful? I genuinely nearly gagged when I was in the shop. And maybe I'm just being a bit of a Grinch, and I'm definitely feeling my age at the moment, in the sense that my attitude is different about, or is governed by my age about a lot of things. For example, I was thinking about the Jake Paul Mike Tyson fight the other day. And if you don't know, Jake Paul is a social media influencer type person. I don't really know who he is. I'm just aware of the name. But he's become a boxer, a heavyweight boxer, and he challenged Mike Tyson. They had a fight and Jake Paul won. And I just felt a bit sad. Now, forget about the fact that Jake Paul has a terrible reputation. Forget about the fact that who Mike Tyson is and what he might have done. It was just, just in isolation, if you take the fact that Mike Tyson is one of the most successful, I can't remember what belts he held or what titles he has, but one of the most famous and well-known, that's famous, isn't it? One of the most famous and decorated heavyweight boxers of the last however many years. And it's this sort of idea of Jake Paul, hugely famous, very, very rich, wants to get into boxing. It's not good enough to box at his level. It's almost like tarnishing the legacy of what came before, or instead of standing on the shoulders of the people who came before you and acknowledging and having reverence for their impact in your field, it's to eradicate it, to override it. And I feel really, generationally, I just can't think, why am I thinking like this? And it's because I suppose I feel like I've been around for a long time. And it makes me feel really sad that your accomplishments can be just wiped out or can mean very little. Not that I'm talking about in the context of me, obviously, but I just felt like Jake Paul and Mike Tyson, that just was an excellent example of why does the new have to diminish the old in order for it to be validated or in order for it to mean something. And so that's what that kind of, I know we went from Sol de Janeiro to that really damn quick, but it's just this sort of, it just makes me think how harder it is for kids these days, for younger generations to navigate so much, because it is so much harder than it was for us. And yet you have things like that where it's like, why are we pulling down what came before? Why? I mean, okay, I'm a journalist. I mean, I'm trying to think of the context of which, like, what if I just suddenly said, you know what, I'm too old to do it. But say somebody came along in their 20s and started to pull down Anna Wintour. I mean, it would kind of be nuts, wouldn't it? Anyway, that's what I've been musing about. Is it an age thing? I know that a lot of us here today are of a similar age, sort of 40s and older and younger. But I mean, I think the general is in the 40s, early 50s. So if you've noticed that kind of trend, if you've thought, I wouldn't want to be a kid today because I think we had it pretty easy in comparison, please let me know. Let's talk about it on Substack. Let's talk about it on email. Let's talk about it on DM. I'll put all of the ways in which you can contact me in the show notes or underneath this video. We started off talking about Vinted as well. I think I've just gone off on a spiral this week. It's there's just so much going on. I told you, creative mind, you cannot tame it. So anyway, I've had a lot of fun with Vinted as well. But that was making me think about Sol de Janeiro and how people spend so much money, kids spend so much money on these things because of what the brand says, whereas it's quite nice. I'm buying £8 equipment shirts because I love the brand, but I don't want to pay / can't afford for the full price kit, but get no less enjoyment from getting it from Vinted. Oh, this has been a journey. Oh, maybe I need to be a bit harder on myself or a bit easier on myself again. Let me know. Anyway, I hope that you've enjoyed our time together. I will put all of the ways in which you can get in touch with me. I would love to hear your thoughts. Obviously, I've been contemplating lots percolating in my brain at the moment, which is why it might have come out in a slightly bizarre style in this episode. But let's chat about it. Please do let me know. Get in touch with me in the way that you prefer, and I shall see you on the next one.